Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for today's All Our Talent Women on Boards and Commissions State Symposium. One of our main responsibilities as a chamber is ensuring our workforce has what it needs to be successful, that businesses have what they need to thrive, that we are a resource and a leader when it comes to business and the success of our region. An important part of that is looking at who is leading our companies and organizations and making sure our leadership is diverse and gender balanced. As leaders in our state, today we're discussing how we can continue to support companies to build better workplaces that attract and retain our best talent of women and identified experienced professionals who haven't been identified to lead on a board or commission. We saw Sacramento take steps to affect change in this space with the first in the nation law requiring publicly held companies to put women on their boards of directors. From the business side of things, not only is this good business, it makes financial sense also. Studies show that organizations perform better, are more successful, and have a competitive advantage when they're driven by diverse and gender balanced leadership. In fact, a 2017 study by Morgan Stanley Capital International found that U.S. companies with 3 or more female directors reported earnings that were 45% higher per share than companies with no female directors. This is about engaging the businesses that run our local economies to bring more gender diversity at the board level as a critical means to ensuring financially stable, innovative, and resilient companies. That is a goal of all of our Talent Women on Boards and Commissions initiative, to make a measurable difference in the number of women serving on corporate, nonprofit, and government boards and commissions across the region. When we started our project with a landscape report to understand the regional numbers and see where women sit in leadership at the board level regionally. On the nonprofit, city, and county level, the balance is fairly good. However, the 88 public companies headquartered in San Diego, only 42 have one board director that's a woman. That's out of 664 seats. Our report not only shows that we have work to do to add more women to these important posts, but it also sheds light on the need to be intentional about connecting talented women in our region from a variety of backgrounds, particularly for women of color with opportunities to lead. As part of this initiative, we launched a partnership with the Board List, a technology company based in Northern California, who is helping us to track a database of diverse female talent from our region and connecting potential board directors with board opportunities. We know there's a wealth of talented women leaders across our region and state that haven't been connected to board opportunities. This project is meaningfully bringing together the supply and the demand. We believe that building businesses and leadership that values diversity and inclusion will lead to better outcomes for our region and a stronger local and state economy as we build our way out of the pandemic. We're proud to have the support from some amazing sponsors like SDG&E, Bank of America, Republic Services, and the Downtown San Diego Partnership, as well as partnerships with the U.S. Chamber and Biocom, who have stepped up to be part of this initiative. They're helping all our talent in events like this one today possible, and most importantly, helping us connect the talented women from across our region to leadership positions that will benefit our businesses and organizations for years to come. This effort really takes all of us. And by all of us, I mean people that look like me who are leading these companies. We need everyone across the business community, men and women, aligned in this effort. I'm excited that we're joined today by business leaders like NASDAQ and the U.S. Chamber who understand this is the right thing for business to do, to bring in the talent we need to strengthen our economy and build better businesses. We also have a true partner in the mayor's office. San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria has led from an equity and inclusion perspective and has made his commitments to gender equity and diversity a priority. I'm happy to have him join us this morning and share his thoughts on the topic and how the city of San Diego is working to advance women and foster more gender equity. Mayor, thanks so much for being here today, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Jerry, thank you so much for that introduction and for including me in this morning's discussion. I want to start right at the top to thank you and the Chamber, to everyone who's helped organize today's event, as well as those sponsoring the event, and certainly the panelists and the participants. I appreciate you all taking part in this extremely important conversation. You know, as mayor for the last 190 days, I set out on an agenda of having diversity and equity to be hallmarks of my administration. And that includes in how we prioritize city expenditure of our limited funds and who is at the table when those important decisions are being made. You know, it's clear to me, I know it's clear to Jerry, and I know it's clear to everyone here this morning because you would be here and you know this is important, that when women and when people of color are represented, when their viewpoints are considered in the development of policies and budgets, we will see better outcomes. And we achieve better outcomes literally for everybody. So studies have shown that when businesses and companies are more successful when their boards are diverse, as Jerry was just mentioning. And if I may just have a point of personal privilege, I'd like to thank and acknowledge San Diego's own Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins, who has been a champion for the inclusion of women on boards of directors. I know we're also going to hear from Fiona Ma, our state treasurer, shortly. She too has been a champion in that regard. A lot of this work happens because of the leadership of individuals like Tony and like Fiona, and I thank them for what they do. But I want to explain and be very direct in saying that the public sector is no different than the private sector. And that's why it's been important for my administration to be inclusive, particularly in our approach to boards and commissions. I'm proud to say that to date, my administration has made great strides to including more women to the boards and commissions that help guide, advise, and direct our city. Of the 50 appointments that we've made to date, half of those appointments are women. We have appointed women to key boards around the city, including our San Diego County Water Authority, San Diego City Employees Retirement System, our pension board, our Small Business Advisory Board, and our San Diego Convention Center. I'm proud of the women that we've appointed. I'm also proud that many of them are women of color, helping to fill out the diversity of the city in the decision-making bodies of our community. I want to be clear that I want San Diego to be a national leader in this effort, a trailblazer in this effort. In fact, I expect our city to do precisely that. And over the coming weeks, months, and years, I hope that we'll be able to build upon the early progress we've made with these appointments to go deeper in the work that we must do to include everybody at the decision-making table here at the city. That work will be advanced soon with the announcement of the appointment of our city's first ever chief equity officer, who will add to the diversity of our city's executive ranks, as well as with the recent release of our first of its kind pay equity study that my office presented to the City Council. That study is a reflection of my commitment to equity, inclusion, fairness, and transparency. And this is where I'll acknowledge that the data in that report is not acceptable to this mayor. It shows significant pay disparities between men and women who work for the city, as well as people of color and their Caucasian colleagues. And we have work to do. But by putting that data out there, by being intentional, by being transparent, that's the first step to making progress on this. And you have my ironclad commitment that we will continue to do that. Going further, to demonstrate our commitment to the All Our Talent Women on Boards and Commissions initiative, my office has been proud to team up with Lead San Diego to help produce the Engage program, which aims to increase representation of women on our city advisory boards. I want to thank specifically Dr. Roxanne Kimani, as well as Samantha Beck for their work to help organize workshops that are drawing more folks to the table. Our office is also working with Mind the Gap, as well as the board list, to maintain a database of qualified candidates who are ready, willing, and able to serve on city advisory boards. Shout out and a great appreciation to Jessica Rounds, who is truly passionate about this work. Jessica, of course, is with Mind the Gap, and her dedication to this effort is making a difference, and I thank her sincerely. I also want to acknowledge the Chamber's Jamie Bradford, who is truly a dynamo in this work and helping to propel and make the city better, both us as an organization and we in the geographic city as a whole. All of these efforts will, I think, make our city better. And I appreciate those of you who are here today to help join this effort of being more inclusive and being more intentional, as Jerry mentioned. And I hope that you will reach out anytime that you see opportunities where, again, the city can meet my expectation of us being a national trailblazer when it comes to equity inclusion, particularly for empowering women. Again, thank you for letting me be here today. And Jerry, if I may, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Gloria. We're fortunate to have you leading San Diego and working to create the best environment for all of us to succeed. Now we're going to go to our first panel. Our guest speakers represent the best of the best, and we'll discuss the innovations happening in California that are advancing women in the boardroom. We hope today's conversation gets us all thinking, and we want to get to your question. We want to get your questions answered. We planned a robust breakout session following our panels. Be sure to stay on and join that to share your thoughts and questions about what you've heard today. With that, I'll turn it over to our panel moderator, California State Treasurer, Fiona Ma. Thank you, Treasurer Ma, very much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry, and I look forward to today's conversation. This panel is focused on companies and organizations and also cities that are leading throughout the state on adding more women from diverse backgrounds to our boards and commissions. I'm excited to hear about some concrete actions that you are all taking so that we are sharing best practices to encourage more diverse leadership at the top. As many of you know, SB 826, a bill by Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, as well as our illustrious Speaker Pro Tem, Madam Toni Atkins, was signed by Governor Jerry Brown on September 30th of 2018. We are the first state in the nation to require publicly traded companies to include more women on corporate boards. 2019 was the first year to have at least one woman. I know that we have made a lot of strides since then. And then 2021 was the second deadline to have a minimum of 2 to 3 women, depending on the size of the corporate boards. And the fines are pretty steep: $100,000 for the first violation, $300,000 for subsequent violations of this law. So I'm just very happy, and I'm anxious to hear how all of you are doing and what you're doing and what you're seeing at your organizations. So I'm gonna start with Carolyn Nguyen. Perhaps, Carolyn, you can give a quick introduction about who you are, what you do for the company, and then maybe talk about measures that your company is taking to advance women's leadership on boards.
Well, thank you, Treasurer Ma, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. My name is Carolyn Nguyen. I'm the CEO of San Diego Gas and Electric. And, I started this company 3 decades ago as a junior engineer and have had a great set of opportunities to move throughout the Sempra Energy family of companies to ascend to this role. This is certainly something that's near and dear to my heart when we talk about women and, women rising through the ranks. Because of my own experience as a woman of color, rising through the ranks in the energy industry, and the support that I've received along the way, I feel very strongly about paying it forward. And I think that certainly given the challenges of our time, from climate change to the pandemic to system and inequalities, we must maximize the diverse human capital, I believe, all around us to develop solutions. Happy to be here and really looking forward to the discussion today.
Okay, thank you. How about Dr. Becky Pettit? You are at UCSD and you have an intersectional lens in higher education. Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here. I just want to start by sharing that at UC San Diego. Let me back up. My role is I am the Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and my job is working with our senior leaders and our campus at large to diversify our organization, not just in terms of presence, but of full and true inclusion. And on the topic of women, 10 of 17 of our cabinet members are women. 7 of 14 deans are women. 4 of 7 college provosts are women. 52% of senior managers are women. And since 2014, the number of women faculty has increased 37%. And so what I want to say is that this doesn't happen by accident. It happens with intention. So I look forward to sharing some strategies as we move forward.
Okay, how about Ashley? Welcome.
Hi, good morning, and thank you to San Diego Chamber. Happy to be here. I'm just so grateful to be able to share the stage with such remarkable panelists and women. I am the VP of Governmental Affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I also lead a program and started a program at the Chamber called Women Taking the Lead. This is a program I started in 2019 in an effort to bring women who are leading at the highest levels across business and government together. There's a lot of news about the lack of women at the top, but where I sit, we see a lot of women leading and having a platform and a place to showcase the women and the businesses that are doing well, and supporting women and putting women at the top is a priority for us at the Chamber. I'm looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Pamela.
Good morning. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here. It's such an honor and pleasure to be with such fabulous women leaders in San Diego. I'm Pamela Gabriel, and I'm the San Diego Market Executive for Bank of America here in San Diego. In my particular role, I oversee our strategic vision for Bank of America here locally, as we are a large company nationally, but we want to make sure that we're a local company. And so in my particular role, I oversee our external relationships, which includes our nonprofit partners, our partners like the Chamber, as well as what we do for our clients and our associates.
All right. So let's go backwards. So Pamela, so what are you doing specifically in the San Diego region? Any tips or best practices you would say is working with Bank of America?
Absolutely. First and foremost, it's definitely this program is something that we're doing externally to ensure that companies here locally are investing in women and encouraging women to get onto boards. I think internally, we definitely have had a huge investment. It's definitely one of our core priorities, and it's something that Brian Moynihan really stresses at the top. Like one of our peers here, 50% of our workforce is, women. We provide a lot of different support, from not only an extended, maternity leave to a lot of different groups such as Lead for Women. And then on top of it, we're also one of only 5 S&P 100 companies with 6 or more women on our actual board. So not only do we live it from a company standpoint, but definitely partnering with organizations like the Chamber to encourage women to go on the boards. It's definitely something that we are very passionate about, and it's our second year doing so with them. And so we're truly enjoying the partnership and hoping to see a lot more women on boards.
So it seems like Bank of America is way over the goal in SB 826 with 6 or more women. Thank you. Good for you. And Bank of America. How about Carolyn? What is SDT doing, or what are your stats?
Yeah, well, let me start with what we're doing. It all begins with making clear what your company values are and building, I believe, really an inclusive culture by kind of rallying employees around those values. And, one of our 3 values is to champion people. And to champion people, to me, means that we're investing in our employees and value diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, we see ourselves as really a people company. And so we're intentional about job rotation, succession planning, offering development and mentorship opportunities, and really having more disciplined structures in place to sustain these efforts over, a long period of time. And, there's a saying that leaders are made and they're not born. So my professional journey, I think, is proof of that. When I started, as I mentioned, as a junior engineer, fresh out of college, I never thought that one day I would or I could become the CEO or of SDG&E or the chair of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. And, the reason why I am where I am today, I think, is because I've been the beneficiary of all of those things that I mentioned earlier. I was rotated through different positions that really challenged me to grow. I had mentors who helped and inspired me along the way, both men and women. But people like Debbie Reed, our former CEO of Sempra Energy. I work for a company that I'm blessed that has a long-standing commitment to advance women's leadership, not just inside the company, but also outside. Maybe a few examples that I would give when you talk about best practices is, we have a thriving mentorship program. It's called Empower. And it's designed to enhance diversity and inclusion. And there's mentees and mentors that are paired to, enhance the participants' career experience and knowledge and inclusive leadership skills. And, our company as a whole benefits by having employees who are more engaged in their careers. They're aware of the importance of diversity and inclusion and prepared to be successful at all levels within the company. We also have all of our directors and officers serve on nonprofit boards, really getting them exposed to the community and giving back and exposed to the governance. And then, just paying it forward. I think aside from job rotations and leadership training, it's also important for those in leadership positions like myself to own their own responsibility to develop other women leaders and help them advance. And, at SDG&E, all of our executives are mentors. And to us, great leaders are not just good at what they do, but they thrive on inspiring and coaching and sponsoring new generations of leaders. I would say, as our Sempra Energy family of companies, 33% of our board of directors are female. And, that number has fluctuated from 33% to 40%. But, we have a culture that supports women leaders and a culture that shows it's possible to ascend to those highest positions.
Yeah, and congratulations, Carolyn, as one of the top CEOs, top women CEOs in California. Ashley was just talking about that. So I'm just going to ask Ashley, besides Carolyn, how about some of the other women CEOs? What are they doing, or what is the chamber doing to encourage more women in leadership positions?
Great. Well, thank you for that question. I really like this quote, so I'm going to say this. It's from Winston Churchill, and he says, "Some regard private enterprise as a tiger to be shot, and others look upon it as a cow they can milk. Only a handful see it for what it really is, the strong and willing horse that pulls along the whole cart." So at the chamber, we feel like we're going to be that willing horse that pulls along the whole cart. And for those of you who don't know, our new president and CEO at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is Suzanne Clark. She's the first woman president in our 109-year history to lead the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And this is sort of one way we are communicating to from the top of our organization to our many state and local chambers and our businesses that we represent. We represent businesses across all sizes and sectors of the economy. And we work with them every day. We're the pulpit, the platform to talk and advocate for the business voice. So we believe that you can grow diversity on corporate boards, not just through quotas or mandates, but through disclosure and dialogue. We've encouraged companies to disclose gender and race of their directors as well as their director nominees. And we support federal policies that encourage that as well. So that's what we're doing is we're the voice, we're the platform, we're pulling everyone together to talk about this. We do that not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's good for business. And we're making that argument and we're seeing that come to fruition, right? All the data shows diverse leaders, increase the company's productivity and the revenue and innovation. And the more you do that, the more diversity of thought that comes to the table, it's good for business. And you know what I like to say is women are half the talent pool. We're half the job market. We're 70 to 80% of purchasing power. We control $11 trillion in investable assets. And having women leaders in our organization and on our boards and panels with that perspective is really a business imperative. You can't do business without having that voice. And so it's happening not only naturally, it's happening, you know, California has done a great job, but it's how we're communicating, having a stage and a platform and a pulpit in which to sort of highlight the policies and the politics that have to accompany these solutions. So, you know, S&P made a record achievement in advancing the status of women this year. You know, as of last July, women now have a seat at every S&P 500 company table, and evolution is also occurring with the Fortune 500 companies. The latest Fortune 500 list revealed about 33 companies have female CEOs, but so much more needs to happen, but we can celebrate that progress, right? The growth of women in business is really the most represented in the small business sector. And that's the fastest subset of startups that these are owned and operated by women. And women-owned small businesses made up about 40% of the about 28 million small businesses just over the last year or two. And of course, the pandemic has hurt us the most. We're the fastest growing and then the hardest hit due to the pandemic. And that's why the chamber has kind of put together efforts around childcare. Because if you don't open the schools, you don't have efforts behind childcare, you're not going to be able to help women in business. And we're making a lot of progress. We have a long way to go. This is the first time business has ever talked about childcare ever. So it's incredible, but it's happening and it's now part of the national spotlight and we're talking about it and we're making changes. So we are sort of partnering with our member companies, our chambers. We're making, having dialogue for change, and we're relentlessly sort of making that case for diversity. There's a lot of great examples. I was thinking about Amazon. Amazon recently adopted a policy to promote diversity in its board of directors. So it's ensured, like, the initial list of candidates chosen for that position include qualified women and minorities. This is a smart move for them. Of course, they employ over 600,000 people and have upwards of 100,000 or 100 million customers. So having this mandate and this discussion at the very top is very helpful. We've seen Edison Electric and some of the gas associations pull together. The member companies kind of pull together and talk about that. And they've had, after a lot of discussions now, business investors have developed a model to report on their ESG and what they're doing. So because of that, you're seeing a lot of changes there as well. So with that, I'll just hand it over to the other panelists.
Well, thank you, Ashley. It's great to hear, number one, that you have your first CEO, first woman ever at the U.S. Chamber. That is really leading by example. It's great to hear all the corporations are getting on board and, realizing that this is important. And, women, as women, we are not going to go away. And with more disclosure and transparency, as well as dialogue, I think things are going to keep improving for women. But I'd like to hear from Dr. Pettit, head of DEI at UC San Diego, after listening to all the women here on the corporate side, wondering what, you can tell us, because I think some of maybe the nonprofits or the educational institutions have been including women and a little bit more diverse and inclusive over the many decades. So, Dr.
Sure. Thank you. Speaking about this specifically from my milieu, higher education, there is some crossover, some similarities, of course. When I talk to my colleagues and other institutions about this work, I really emphasize the importance of creating the right environment before you go out and recruit women. because when you invite us, and I will say before you recruit women of color as well, when you invite us to apply, we go to your site and we look for signs of your commitment. And what do we see? What do we see on your websites? What do we see in terms of presence? What do we see in terms of who is in leadership? So do your own work first, knowing that as candidates, as those you are pursuing, we are very selective in terms of where we apply because we can choose where we want to work. Others have talked about family-friendly policies, and no kidding, this did not happen at my own institution, but in my consulting business, I was working with an organization and the focus was on recruiting women. I go into the C-suite, there are no pictures of women on the walls, and there are no women's restrooms in the C-suite. So I had to go somewhere else. So really focusing on creating the right environment when you invite women to your workplace and women of color, are you creating the conditions for them to thrive? So I want to talk about one of our key strategies, which is our strategic plan for inclusive excellence. And through that, our work is to create structures, processes, and policies that will outlive any of us charismatic leaders. So that was a joke. So I am able to bring people on board, help them find their voices about why this is important. And I want to make sure that we are creating conditions and creating processes that will continue to work regardless of who the leader is in that seat. So I'll give you an example of how we build that structure around faculty diversity. So first, in our advertisements, we are saying we are committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion. We have found our voice around that. We are articulating our why. Why is equity, diversity, and inclusion important in higher education? And then when we have an applicant, one's application is not complete unless they can tell us how they will contribute to diversity. So we require contribution to diversity statements for an application to be complete. Before a committee can start interviewing candidates, they have to have implicit bias training so that they are mindful of their own biases as we are going through the hiring process. We have created a structure so that we can review the process as it moves along. So who is in your applicant pool? Who is in your long list? Who is in your short list? Who did you invite to campus, et cetera, right? And we review those outcomes annually, because if you are not really thoughtful and intentional, those are two important words you'll hear me use over and over again, and self-diagnostic and looking at your outcomes on a regular basis, you don't really pay attention to your opportunities to improve. And an important piece of this is accountability. So we tell our leaders that this is part of our mission. It is mission critical. It is part of your job. Therefore, you are evaluated on the extent to which you have helped advance our goals. And then we have an annual reporting process where our unit leaders appear before me, the chancellor, the executive vice chancellor, and other senior leaders to say, here's how last year went. Here's how I did well. Here are my opportunities for improvement. Here are the strategies that I'm going to employ to improve in the next year. So I'll stop there. There's lots more, but I'll stop there and summarize by saying it is important to articulate your commitment, make sure it is visible, and then hold yourselves accountable.
Right. Well, thank you. All of you said a couple of things that struck a chord with me. I started my CPA career with one of the big 8 accounting firms and left after 5 years because nobody looked like me. There were no women in leadership, no women on the board, no women that I could look up to be mentors. And so I do think it is important to have women in leadership like Carolyn at the top. And, let's see, Ashley talked a little bit about childcare, and I know that San Diego Regional Chamber, that has been a priority. We have met many times, and they want to figure out how to increase childcare slots and make that more of a priority. And so I thank the Regional San Diego Chamber for making this a priority. Just wondering at your companies, Carolyn, Pamela, what type of accommodations or flexible work, maybe it's flexible work time, maybe it's providing more childcare slots, or anything creative that you all are doing to encourage more women to stay or to come and grow in your organization?
Well, I can start with that. Certainly during the pandemic, certainly women have faced some significant challenges with childcare, with helping their kids get on Zoom calls, especially young kids. So we've been very thoughtful about all of our employees and what the challenges are. We've even shortened meetings, so there's time between one meeting and another meeting, so they don't go an hour and you're running back to back to back. We try to create some time during the lunch hour, like a no meetings policy, from 11:30 to 1, to the extent that you can do that. We've tried to create time and capacity for that flexibility, because we certainly know how difficult the last 16 months have been to try to be, productive at work, try to be a good mom, try to get your kids online. I have a 17-year-old daughter, and I think when she thinks I'm home, I'm here to serve. What's for lunch? What's for breakfast? Can I have a smoothie? All of the things I know that all the mothers out there can relate to. And so, I like to lead based on my own experiences, and I know how challenging that is. So we've really tried to create that flexibility. If employees have to work at night, after the kids, are off school, okay, we'll be flexible with the schedule. So I think that's been very, very important to continue to have our employees engaged, continue to have our employees understand that we're a company a company that cares about every employee, and try to create that flexibility. And I think that's been really important to the engagement and the productivity of our employees. So it's a win-win.
Hey, how about Pamela?
Yes. As I had mentioned before, Bank of America Sincerely really is committed to supporting women, even with childcare support. Prior to the pandemic, we provide Childcare Plus, which is up to $240 per month per child for women to be able to use, and or parents in general to use. But when the pandemic happened, we realized that this was just a significant impact, and it wouldn't even cover it, considering a lot of the concerns that had happened. So during the pandemic, we actually offered our associates $100 per day for childcare support, and this could have been a family member or any individual that they needed and felt secure and comfortable having in their home. So for me, honestly, like 100 per day was just absolutely crazy. And so I think that just goes to show how far they're willing to support them. In addition to that, I believe for our maternity, we have the 20 weeks. We also have family reimbursement services for, women who would like to do surrogacy or fertility adoption, which is something that I hope to do one day. But I think in general, it has just truly been wonderful to see Bank of America just step up and provide that additional support for women. And, I think depending on the particular roles, there's definitely that flexibility between, we understand that you have to pick up your child by 3 o'clock, otherwise you have that penalty and you got to go. So understanding that and allowing associates to do that and not feeling stressed that if they did, they would have, repercussions is something that we really try to ensure all of our leaders really convey to our associates that know that they're supported.
So, Ashley, if there are companies that are not as progressive out there as part of your member companies, what do you do to, showcase or spotlight, or, the fact that the S&P, all the companies have women on their boards is amazing to me. And, because S&P does it now. The Fortune 500 is, feeling a little bit pressure. I mean, that's kind of how it works. What do you say to like women who are working for companies that are not that diverse? Is there something that we can do to encourage our leadership to kind of open their eyes and get with the times?
Yes, I mean, I think the more we talk about, the more we talk, the more we gather, the more we help women help each other, the better it is for everyone. At the Chamber, we have put together a program called Women Taking the Lead, and it's really a program for women across all sectors of the economy and government, specifically because in DC, that's who our audience is Capitol Hill and the federal government, and bringing women together to support each other, bringing women together to talk about their challenges is really helpful. And out of those networks grow a real support. So I think I would encourage other companies to create these efforts, to create, in other chambers. And we're seeing that, they're taking a lot of our examples of the programming that we're doing, and they're doing it also in their state and local chambers, getting women together to talk about how to help each other. And so, I would encourage that. We encourage that, creating a network is helpful. There's women in tech, women in government, women in, small business, but enjoying those atmospheres really does help you have increase your ability to want to rise, because like you said, when you don't see someone like you at the top, it's very difficult. So sometimes you need to go outside of your own corporation or your own business and connect with others in other places in order to push help encourage your growth forward. And I guess, I would also say, and something we're kind of leaning into right now is, there are more than 10 million job openings, and there's 9.8 million underemployed Americans. So we use this messaging. That's 1 million openings in 1 month and more than 2.5 million job openings since 2021. And so when we talk about this, it's the lack of workers in industries hitting up all sectors. It's really a challenge. We need to open our economy. We need to have more people back at work and asking those questions. Why? Is it the unemployment insurance? What is it? And we're seeing a lot of different things come out of these studies. 16% say it's not worth searching for a job because of money. 24% say childcare and family care is a factor. So leaning into those factors and helping solve those problems will get more women to the top.
Well, what you said about unemployment. So today, California just announced that we are going to stop giving unemployment benefits to people who are not actively applying for jobs. And I do know that in the service sector, service space especially, they can't open at full capacity like restaurants and hotels because they say they can't find people to work, and it's more profitable for them to stay home. So now California is hearing that, I think, from different industries, and now we're gonna, you're not gonna get unemployment if you're gonna sit on a beach, do surfing. I mean, you really need to be looking for work, which is what unemployment benefits were intended in the first place. So, ladies, how about any roadblocks you've faced in your career? Let's just turn it over a little bit. Or Dr. Pettit, let me go to you. As you're listening to all of these, tidbits and suggestions, is there something that you would highly recommend that California companies or U.S. companies or just, anyone who's hiring anything really should think about in this new DEI era?
Yeah, I go back to creating the right environment. I feel like what happens oftentimes is people rush to signal inclusion, but the organization has not really done the work to be a welcoming and inclusive environment. So if we think about what happened after the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, many corporations and organizations issued these statements about their commitments, and many organizations began hiring senior diversity leaders. And I have a really broad network, and I happen to know that many of those organizations were not ready for individuals who are change agents. Because when you hire someone like me, what you're saying is we no longer want to keep doing what we've been doing, right? We know that to improve our outcomes, we cannot keep doing the same thing, right? So they're not really ready for change. So it is critically important that you are genuine about this and that you do your own work before you invite someone into a hostile work environment, right? And I also want to be sure that as we're having this conversation, that we're thinking about intersectionality, right? Increasing the presence of women in leadership, and what does it mean to have a more capacious thinking about what that is, and how we are also thoughtful about recruiting women of color, how we're also thoughtful about recruiting LGBT people to the organization. So just thinking very broadly and not singularly, and having a genuine commitment.
So I'd like to just talk a little bit about some of your personal experiences, because I think people who are listening, we're all at the level that we're at, but we didn't get here overnight, right? So what is some advice you would give to young women who are starting their career, if they want to become the CEO of SDG&E? Carolyn, like, what would you recommend? Or, Pamela or Ashley, any tips, any, things that have helped you, barriers you have faced, obstacles? I'm sure, we've all failed at some point and we all have gotten back up. And, I'm one that believes that things happen for a reason, right? If something doesn't happen that you really want to happen, it's probably going to work out for the best in you in the long run. And you just have to have faith that that's going to happen. But how about you ladies? Let's start with Pamela.
Yes. So as far as roadblocks, definitely have been faced with a lot of those and definitely have failed. And I think even just learning how to fail was something I needed to learn. But I would say as far as boards go, some of the roadblocks that we see here and placing some of our local leadership into boards is one, the opportunity, and then two, financials, and then three, it's also, board training. But with all of that being said, we do really try to provide board training. From myself and my team, we created a board training segment that happens several times throughout the year so that all of our associates, if ready financially and mentally and have the opportunity, are prepared to actually represent and be professional and be knowledgeable about how to make a motion or to do anything that needs to happen within a board. And so we try to support them. Myself personally, we've created a process here in San Diego where we allow associates who mention that they're interested in a board, they submit a survey and talk about what their interests are so that we can really make them with with organizations that match their interests. Because the last thing we want to do is put someone on a board who isn't passionate and isn't really delivering, and they just kind of, their name's there. They have to be active. Like, that's a mandatory thing for me. But throughout that process, I really make sure that they understand that this is a commitment not only where they may be representing Bank of America, but first and foremost themselves as an individual, so that they can really do the give gets and everything else that comes along with it. And so I would say we have a lot of roadblocks in general for associates getting to boards, but programs such as this and having the connections, like, all our women on boards, and being able to have someone in that profile that they're creating in this database to say, I actually know this person, I can vouch for them and get them into that board, I think has been helpful in some of the things that we're trying to do and overcome some of those roadblocks.
Yeah, I think that is a good point, because for many women, many of us have sat on a lot of nonprofit boards where we don't get paid, and we rise up to places of leadership where we have that confidence. And then the next step is trying to get on those paid corporate boards. I think that is the mystery, and where everyone is trying to figure out, right? Women don't want to be on a board and not get paid anymore, right? So many people said, well, I've done all the board, the nonprofits, I want to get paid. How do I get on these corporate boards? Any advice, Ashley, for getting a paid corporate board position?
Well, yeah, it's a big conversation. It continues to be networks and networking. You need to expand your network. You need to be talking to everybody. You need to have friends in a lot of different places. So everything you can join, every place you can speak, every way to increase your visibility and create a brand, a personal brand is really helpful. The problem is, and the way I see the problem is that the corporate boards tend to have an average age of 70-year-olds or 65-year-olds, and they don't retire very quickly, and boards aren't expanding. And the last year we saw boards were taking on an extra place or position in order to get that diversity. So if people aren't retiring or turning over, you're not getting that opportunity or that big, huge opportunity to get in. But you got to be at the right place at the right time. So yeah, my suggestion would be, to create the board resumes, their board bios, get involved with board list, and the chamber collects resumes. Everybody collects resumes for board serving people who are ready to serve on the board. NACD, National Association of Corporate Directors, they have training programs. You have to be careful, because I think there's a lot of people who want to train you for money to get on corporate boards. There's like a cottage industry that has popped up because of that. I don't know if women need more training or just, more opportunity. And so I would suggest really making sure you, again, expand those networks, and people who are sitting on corporate boards, who are talking to people who want corporate, like, for example, recruiters often call and say, who do you know? Or they call and they talk to me, and who do you know who has global experience, who has tech experience out of your network? And I think, okay, I know these 6 people, and I've said I'm available. I will help any recruiter who is looking for a woman. And I'm really sick of these conversations that say, and it was just 2 or 3 years ago, where there was an article that came out that says that we're having so much pressure to diversify our slate for corporate boards, or diversify, having so much pressure on recruiters to come up with a slate of diverse candidates. And they said, well, there's not enough women in the pipeline. They're not qualified. And it was quotes just 2 or 3 years ago. And that's where we started Women Taking the Lead. Because we're like, are you kidding me? I know VPs all across Washington, D.C. How is this in 2019 still happening? And is it because we are not speaking about our job enough? Or we're not, on these platforms, we're not talking, or we're not visible? Or, what really is the issue? And so I guess I would say, really, really put yourself out there. Say yes to everything, and build those networks, because women tend to put their head down and do the best job possible, thinking they're going to get promoted. And that's not often the case. There's that formula, PIE, performance, image, exposure, and women tend to put 80% of their time on performance, where they just put their head down and work. and 10% on exposure. Whereas men, they spend 80% of their time on exposure and 10% of their time on performance. And so, maybe we need to learn and to get out there more and put more time in that exposure piece in order to get those promotions and those opportunities for board roles. So that's a long way of saying, talk to everybody, put yourself out there, continue to push, and we will all come around you and support you.
I love that. I'm taking notes.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Pettit. So, I belong on a number of women's organizations, one in particular, California Women Lead, where we really deliberately go into communities and train women to serve on a gubernatorial appointment. Governor Jerry Brown and Governor Gavin Newsom have committed to having 50% of their appointees women, and we don't want them ever to say, where are the women? There's no women available. No one's in the pipeline. Oh no, we have a lot of women in the pipeline. So I definitely hear you, Ashley. And another thing you brought up was time. Maybe we need term limits. I would not be treasurer of the state of California without term limits. My former boss would still be in the Senate. The longtime assembly member speaker would still be in the legislature. And I definitely would probably be back doing accounting. So when we talk about longevity, and I get it, the average age of these corporate board members are older, they get comfortable, they're all friends, they hang out together, and you can't kick them off, without some sort of term limit. I don't know if Becky, Dr. Pettit, if you think that maybe should be incorporated because it doesn't open up any slots for any additional people.
Absolutely. There's no more to add to it. There should be term limits to make room. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, you ladies? We only have a couple more minutes. Anything we didn't touch upon or that you think is important that you're working on that, you're excited about, or maybe a new initiative?
Maybe I'll add something. And you had asked, what have we learned growing up to kind of get to the positions we're at? And I think someone mentioned it, but a lot of times I see confidence as kind of a barrier for women, right? I see, and I think one of the panelists made a comment about, I think it might have been Ashley, about, men spending a lot of their time networking and women don't, right? Or women have to be, I've experienced myself, unless I was 110% sure that what I was saying had value in a meeting, in my early days, I wouldn't speak up. So I just encourage women to find their voices early and gain that confidence to, if you're invited to a meeting, you're there to add value. Speak up because you might not be 1,000% right, but probably your gut will tell you you're adding value. So I would just encourage women to have more confidence. I mean, one of the reasons we created the All Our Talent Women on Boards and Commissions for the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce is to get more women out there networking and having conversations and, in working with the board list, help connect them with more diverse candidates and give them the confidence that they can be on a board or they can be on a commission. The talent is out there for sure. And it's just a matter of matching, the many talented women whose expertise and interests really align with the organizations seeking candidates with the same attributes. And I think diverse, talented women are often untapped for opportunities to serve on these boards because they're not part of those traditional networks. And, I would say for organizations and companies really committed to increasing women in leadership, it's also important that they're investing in training and development programs to help build your pipeline. And if the pipeline isn't there, it doesn't matter how early you need to start recruiting and you need to start building that pipeline of really talented, diverse candidates, women included, to ascend to these higher positions.
So if I could add to that, I think it is important for those of us in senior leadership to do our own personal inventories. So we've talked about organizations and looking at the diversity of organizations, but I encourage us to ask ourselves, when is the last time I personally sponsored a woman? When was the last time I personally sponsored a woman of color, right? Looking at your own track record and challenging yourself to do better in the next year than you have done than you've done this year. And to those male leaders, make sure you have women advisors around you and listen to us. Trust women. That's it.
And maybe I'll just add one thing to that. I mean, our male leaders, many of them are girl dads, right? They have daughters or granddaughters, right? That they want to see to continue to ascend and build a career in this next generation. There's lots of allies out there, whether it's women or men. So I just encourage everyone listening to this today to really seek out, because there are both women and men that love to sponsor, diverse talent.
So thank you. I'm just going to wrap up, ladies. So, leading by example is important, finding that mentor, have confidence, network, focus a little bit more on exposure. Culture is important when you're looking for an organization to work or grow in, and things don't happen by accident. You need intentionality. So I thank all of you ladies for your time today, and keep doing what you're doing, being rock stars, keep rising and moving up, and look forward to seeing you out there now that we're open back up. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to the chamber.
All right, everyone, welcome to our second panel. I hope you enjoyed the first panel. It was a really wonderful discussion. I'm so glad to see you all and have so many wonderful faces here today. I guess can't really see you all, but I know you're there. So it's in this virtual world we live in. I'm Jessica Grounds. I'm so glad to be here, and I want to welcome everyone to our, as I said, second panel for our All Our Talent State Symposium. This panel is going to really discuss kind of the next step of what we heard in our first panel, which is how do we source this diverse talent that we know is there, amazing women, women of color on these boards that we need them at the board level, at the commission level. And there's just really this idea of how do we connect supply and demand. This is a very fundamental thing, but as we heard from the first panel, we have to be intentional. So I'm really excited to have this amazing lineup of colleagues here and speakers. As I mentioned, I'm Jessica Grounds. I'm the co-founder of Mind the Gap and also very proud to be the lead advisor on this All Our Talent initiative with the San Diego Chamber of Commerce Foundation. I'm joined by panelists from mostly the West Coast. All of us are on the West Coast, California and Washington State, to bring their insights and expertise today. Before I introduce each of our panelists and then I start to get into our questions, I wanted to mention that we are doing a really, I think, innovative way that we can online of having questions and answers and also discuss what we've heard today through breakout rooms. So at the end of this panel, you'll be prompted to join a Zoom event. We have amazing discussion leaders, CEOs of organizations and companies, heads of their work to talk about what we heard and really think about some best practices. How can the business really lead on bringing more diversity at the top, because it really takes all of us. So I want to quickly mention our amazing panelists. We have Kaylee Carafa, who is the Director of Board Engagement and also Governance Council at NASDAQ. We're really happy to have you here, Kaylee. Thank you. And I know serves on a number of nonprofit boards, so she can share about that, which I love. Maria Salinas, we have the CEO of the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much, Maria, for being here and all your leadership in the LA area. We have Joanna Rees, who is here in her capacity as board member of Him for Her, which is an amazing group I've been connected with, working to diversify the boards of our companies. And also she's on the board of FICO and a number of privately held companies. Thank you so much, Joanna, for being here. And of course, last but not least, we have Morgan Carvajal, who is the Chief Deputy of Appointments for Governor Newsom's office. And Morgan, we're so thrilled to have you here and bring in the conversation from how Governor Newsom has really led on diversity, but what we can do at the the state and even federal level, right? The government level really on building this diversity of conversation. So thank you, Morgan. So I'd love to start with Kaylee with NASDAQ, because I think you sit in this very interesting place as we talk about this conversation and your perspective from the West Coast, but also nationally on identifying talented women at the board level. You advise board directors, you advise board chairs and CEOs about this challenge we have to bring more diversity to the board level, and the importance of board governance to the success of companies. I'd love to hear from you. Kind of where do you see this conversation from your vantage point? Where are we today in this challenge as we bring more diversity to our boards?
Thanks, Jessica. That's certainly a heavy and loaded question to discuss. So just for a little bit of more background on myself and my role with NASDAQ and some other roles. As Jessica mentioned, I'm Senior Director of Board Engagement and Governance Council with NASDAQ, and my practice with NASDAQ really does focus around advising boards of corporations of all types, so large for-profit, multinational corporations down to local nonprofits and associations that impact the lives of people in the U.S. and around the world. I am an attorney by background, so I come at my role currently a little bit through that lens of having started in private practice many years ago and then moving through an in-house practice, serving as corporate counsel and ultimately general counsel before joining NASDAQ. And then I also serve on the board of a for-profit and not-for-profit corporation, so I get the insight of sitting on the other side of the table where I'm not advising, I'm actually sitting either as board chair or as an independent director of a number of organizations. And so I've really developed from kind of a multiplicity of perspectives how important diversity is to enhancing performance of any organization, irrespective of whether it's a governmental entity or a for-profit or not-for-profit. I think, 5 or 6 years ago when I moved into my corporate governance practice, there was a lot of conversation around, should we add a woman to the board? And that was a huge barrier at that time. And it's funny to see how quickly that has changed and that those ideas have become very outdated, which I'm very glad to hear. I'm not going to say that there aren't still a number of challenges and obstacles that many women and other people of diversity have to overcome to reach seats either in the C-suite or in the boardroom. But I think that there is a much more accepted perspective and understood perspective that diversity is linked to enhancing corporate performance, innovation, and long-term sustainability and growth for every organization. In my role with NASDAQ, we touch a lot of companies and organizations around the world, as I mentioned. We have a number of advisory arms and products where we are working through either our corporate solution services, which is where I sit in my advisory role. And then, of course, we have our stock exchange, where last year we submitted our diversity proposal to the SEC, where as a self-regulatory organization, we want to impact capital markets. We want to impact the way that boardrooms look, but do it in a way that is reflective of what investors, companies, regulators, the market, and I think people at large want to see in terms of change and evolution in the boardroom. Our proposal is really intended to enhance effective corporate governance in companies by allowing for more transparent disclosure of board diversity. And so the proposal is meant to be one that supports diversity by having any NASDAQ listed company disclose its board composition, and then coupled with a requirement that each board should have at least one woman and one person who is ethnically or racially diverse or identifies as LGBTQ serve on the board. It's really meant to be one that allows board to maintain their autonomy over who is sitting around the table, because I think it is very important for every organization and every board to have a thoughtful succession planning process that thinks about the business, the company's stakeholders, and where it wants to go, not only in the next year, but over the course of the next 5 years, and have people around the table that can help support oversight, and then be strategic advisors and partners for the CEO and the management team, and ensuring that the corporation is true to its purpose and serving its stakeholders effectively. And then moving outside of just our proposal with the SEC that we expect to have a ruling on come early August, hopefully. In my practice, I often see through working with boards that there have been barriers. And, I think that there are some that still exist unfortunately, for some corporations. I think California has been one of the key leaders in the US and with its gender diversity bill a few years ago, which has promoted really positive change and at least changed the diversity of California companies. But in other boards, I've seen positive evolution in having thoughtful leaders in governance committee chairs and board chairs, and in women who recognize their value, the expertise and perspectives and they bring to the boardroom, and who are willing to connect with others, make those connections, and then step up and be willing to make their voice heard and an impact in improving the board's overall effectiveness.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. And you hit on so many important pieces to this. I do want to just mention again and reinforce what you shared about what NASDAQ has done on this proposal to say, hey, diversity matters to the success of our companies, and we want to encourage our companies to do that. That's a great example of company, you are a company and you also obviously support companies, and you're putting a stake in the ground and saying this matters to our success, our financial success, our growth. And I think that's just a meaningful example of what you can do. But also your point, which we love to see so much, and I know we see in the research very deeply, when you have women at the board and at that highest level, CEOs, as we had Caroline before, CEO of a major utility, they pay attention to diversity and they're saying, hey, this room doesn't look like it should. And so I think that those are really important points. So thank you for sharing. I look forward to having more of your input. Maria, I'd love to turn to you. You are in obviously a very exciting, great standpoint in terms of running a chamber, a regional chamber, as a woman, a Latina in Los Angeles, which is fantastic. In LA, I'd love to hear, do you have some examples from member companies of yours that have really thought about this supply issue? Because we do tend to hear this still, right? Well, I don't really know where I can find this great Latina to sit on my board, or, they don't think that talent exists when we know it really does. Have you seen some innovative strategies of your member companies or areas that you think we can really maybe learn from that you've seen?
Absolutely, and happy to share some of that. But let me start by first thanking you for this topic, thanking the San Diego Chamber for the invitation to talk about something that I think is really important. In my role, I do get to engage with many large organizations as well as, some startups as well that are looking at their own boards. Our chamber also engages with our educational community in the Los Angeles area. So I get to speak with presidents of universities who are also looking at this issue as well from a governance perspective. I do get that question a lot, and I think that what I would say first and foremost is let's not let that be an excuse. It really is a myth. It is a myth that there are challenges in finding diverse talent. What we really need to do is challenge ourselves to think outside the box in terms of where we are looking, where we are sourcing talent from. And you heard in the earlier panel, and even as Treasurer Ma closed, she talked about intentionality. And for me, it's all about the intentionality. If you want to have diverse candidates on your board, then you need to be very intentional about the strategy that you're going to put in place to identify those candidates, because they are out there. I could just tell you that for myself as a Latina, when I speak to people and they say, we're looking for Latinas for our board, I will ask them, have you connected with Latino corporate directors? I've never heard of them. Have you connected with the Hispanic Corporate Responsibility Association? Never heard of them. So there are organizations in place, there are training programs, there's definitely communities of color that have banded together around this issue. So what we need to do is what I'd like to do is recommend to our member companies, our corporations that are asking those questions, to engage in a very authentic manner with our communities of color, because the talent is there. Forbes does a list of the top Latinas across the country. Many times people don't even know that exists. So the talent is there. It's all about the intentionality to be able to find them. In my own personal experience as having served on a public company board, a community bank that evolved over a 14-year period, and having served as a nominations chair, I know that boards can put strategies in place to go deep, go beyond the typical pool, and it's doable and it's achievable. And I'm very proud of the work that I've done as a director to really highlight the fact that with intentional and strategic plans, you can achieve diversity in the boardroom.
Thank you so much, Maria. You bring up so many great points also that we have to recognize, of course, this intentionality. And when I talk to boards and to kind of the even advocacy community, there is this tendency sometimes to just you go with what you know. You say, okay, well, I'm going to work with my board. I serve as a chair emeritus on a board of a nonprofit myself. We tend to do the same thing. We have to be thoughtful. Wait, hold on. Let's rethink this. Where are these resources? And we do have so many wonderful resources and organizations, and that's a great pivot for me to bring Joanna in. But thank you, Maria, for bringing that up. And again, I just want to reinforce the statistics for our state, because we did. I just helped release a report really recently on women of color on boards. Here in California, we're a little bit better than the national average. 26.5% of our corporate board directors for publicly traded companies are women. Only 6.6% are women of color, and only 1% are Latina. And that is a very, very small number when you consider that Latinas make up about 19% of our population here in the state. So thank you, Maria, for that. And Joanna, I'd love to pull you in. Joanna is with, as I mentioned, serves on a number of boards, as it sounds like all of us do. But she's here in her capacity with Him for Her. And Him for Her, based up in Northern California, has done an amazing job, a really effective model of this idea of how do we bring the supply to the demand. Joanna, could you share a little bit about Him for Her's model, and why do you think it's so effective?
Yeah, and maybe just share a little bit on my perspective of what brought me there, because I think that's what got me to step onto the Him for Her board, was because of my just personal experience with boards. So I started on nonprofit boards, but I ended up on 30 plus boards over time as a venture capital investor. So I essentially got my seat at the table through an investment. And I can tell you, in 25 of those boards, I was the only woman there, and nothing changed over the life of the company. So that's just it was a lonely way to kind of have a professional life, I can tell you. And the problem, as everyone has talked about, and first of all, Maria, Kaylee, Morgan, Jessica, thank you all for the work that you're doing, because it's so important and it takes a village. It's all of these different efforts that are going to really, really promote the change. So I just honor all of you in your work. But it's not, as everyone has said, Maria, you just said, it's not a talent problem. It's not like the talent isn't out there. It's a network problem, because, and Maria, you gave some great suggestions on how to network. And what is, so Him for Her was founded by a woman, Jocelyn Mangan, who I actually met through a fellowship at the Aspen Institute, and she created this as part of a kind of a fellowship, a nonprofit venture, and then realized that the opportunity, the demand was so huge that she turned it into her full-time job. And she came out of the tech sector. So when she started Him for Her, the idea was, how do we do this, but how do we create scale? Because it's wonderful. There's a lot of organizations that are doing things to help, but how can you do that really at scale? And so they created a platform, and they said, like in technology, you want to take all friction out of the process of buying and selling. And how do we do that? So women are not charged to be part of Him for Her. And, there's, again, great organizations, but then to charge the women you're trying to get on board is, adds more friction into it. And so women are onboarded through Him for Her. They're marked with 90 different levels of competency and experience. And we have more than 3,000 women now in the network. A third are women of color, which is probably the only organization with that. And we don't charge companies for bringing them the talent. So it's a free match on both sides. And one area that we've really focused on is focused on the venture capital industry. So we get venture capital firms to commit to put a woman on every single board within their portfolio. And that's where we're going to have massive leverage, because those companies, as we know, especially in California, can start very small and in 5 years be quite large. That has, our goal is to have a woman on every private company board within the next 5 years. So, and I'll just mention one thing, that a lot of these women are hidden within their organizations. Everyone assumes it has to be the C-suite, and we really try to uncover that. We'll stop there so others have opportunity to weigh in.
That's so great, Joanna. And thank you for sharing more about Him for Her's work. And I do want to mention the research that you did with Crunchbase, because again, we have to know where we are to know where we can go. And private company boards, which is also an effort we're working on here in San Diego and across the state, women are about 11% based on your most recent research of private company boards, and 3% are women of color. So we're even in a worse state, obviously, from public company boards, which has more disclosure, although not race and ethnicity or gender required yet, until hopefully NASDAQ has its way, which is great. And also people do the right thing. But also that these trickle in they all affect one another. Morgan, I want to bring you in, and thank you, Joanna, for that great segue to thinking about this, the different dimensions of board leadership. Morgan here with the governor's office, and you work on appointments, and it's really exciting to see beyond, the private sector. We're also talking about city and county and state commissions, and this place where we lack diversity. We tend to have a little bit more women. We did a report down here in San Diego. Women are better on city boards, almost half, not quite, but on county boards, not as many, only about 3/4 maybe, 35%, excuse me. And so I'd love to hear from you. What are you working on sort of at the state level here in California on this issue of identifying diverse talent for our commissions? And, how can we learn from each other in both of these different, the public sector and private sector on building more diversity for women?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jessica. And thank you as well for having us here. When we came on, I'm the Chief Deputy Appointment Secretary, which means that we are in charge of making recommendations to the governor for more than 3,000 appointed administrative positions, but also filling nearly 300 different boards and commissions that operate on issues ranging across the state, not only from looking at our oversight of our licensees on our licensing boards, but looking at issues like transportation for the Transportation Commission, looking at the Commission on Women and Girls, commissions that just the policy issues on water and on land use and everything. It just ranges really, really vastly across the state. And the governor, when he came into office, his charge to us really was that, and has said it several times, so I'll repeat exactly what he tells us, is that he wants his administration to look like the population it serves. He wants the boards and commissions to look like the state. And so with that, we do have to be extremely intentional about, and we have been extremely intentional about our search for members to fill the boards, commissions, and appointed administrative positions. And with that, I think we're actually doing fairly well in the terms of our overall appointments. As you can imagine, there are a ton of them. And so we are constantly recruiting for and being intentional about that recruitment to make sure that we've got not only diversity for gender, but diversity amongst ethnicities, and also diversities of experiences and of regional diversity throughout the state. So we have truly kind of taken that under our wing and under the governor's direction to really change the face of what the administration looks like to better reflect the people of California and the state of California.
Morgan, could you give a couple of examples of how you can be intentional around identifying it? Because again, that's the place I think we want to really give our audience some tactical ways. Like, so, okay, I want to bring in more diversity, but what would be a strategy that seems to be working for the governor's office?
Absolutely. So as Maria, I think, said, I think a lot of it is our partnerships with other organizations. We reach out to organizations like HOPE very often when we're looking for positions of leadership. HOPE is an organization in the state that's helping to train Latinas for leadership positions. So they have a whole host of a pool of candidates for us to talk to fill a lot of legal positions throughout the state, but also a lot of board and commission positions as well. So reaching out to organizations like that make it intentional, right? That building up that network that we have here to be able to do that outreach and reach out to different chambers across the state and different businesses across the state to look for and be intentional about our ask, quite frankly.
Yeah. Right.
When we're asking for, we need to fill a position, we need a CPA, it would be really great to get a woman. Be intentional about what we're asking for. And so that's what we do when we call the organizations and the folks in our network. Is we're very intentional about what we're looking for. And we get a pretty good response rate as far as giving us recommendations for folks, not only on boards and commissions, but for administrative positions as well.
That's great. And I love you mentioned HOPE. I've known Helen Torres for many, many years, and it's really great to see the work you do, but also, use the networks that exist. And we often work in so many silos, I think, in this space, instead of saying, hey, where can we share resources and share ideas so we can scale more quickly? We can learn that from the private sector, right? We need to scale more of this work, I think, in the women's space. Well, I want to open it to all of us on this piece, because, Maria brought up a great word, which is myth, this myth out there a little bit, which we keep running into. But another word, I think Kaylee and I, when we were connecting on this event, we were talking about skeptics. So I think there's two questions I sort of have. One is like, we know from the research that diversity, and we know that women in that diversity make for real financial impact. I would suggest coming out of COVID, we're seeing where we had all these blind spots, right, in terms of how our workplace looked and what women could have brought better, risk mitigation, all of these dynamics. So I'm curious, and we can start with what message works best for these skeptics who are maybe skeptical about, is there really the talent there? Maybe you just produce, here are the women that are amazing, and they are like, okay, you're right. But what kind of messages work well to those skeptics out there who don't see the value in this? I think we need to keep changing kind of hearts and minds as we are practical in our solutions. I'll just open it up to any of you. What messages are working with skeptics who don't see the value of diversity like we all do?
When I speak with companies who are looking to really engage in this space, I find that a lot of times it's the education, that it's educating them about maybe organizations that they're not familiar with. You both mentioned HOPE, for example, who does that training. And by the way, that was the first board I sat on, and I'm actually a founder of Hope. So I'm just going to get that plug in there. But that is a perfect example of an organization that is training Latinas, and they have a proven record of moving those women, those Latinas, onto boards, commissions, and into positions of leadership. So I think those type of examples, sometimes when you share out things like that, where there's outcomes, where there's real metrics that can be pointed to, that could be very powerful information, because we all know that companies and boards are looking at outcomes, they're looking at metrics. And with organizations like Hope, for example, that has those proven metrics, that can change hearts and minds, because here's an impact of a diverse community that, hey, there's some real results there.
That's great. Joanna?
I have 2 comments. Yeah, so I think it's a combination of results and then getting leaders to speak up. So I'll share my own experience. You mentioned I was on the FICO board. I joined that board 5 years ago. The company had been around for 50 plus years. When I joined, we had $1 billion for market cap. I was the only woman on the board. 5 years later, our market cap is $14.5 billion, if you check the stock price this morning. And we now have 3 women and 1 man of color on the board. So we've made this massive transformation over a period of 5 years. I'm not saying that attributed all our results to the change in board, but I do think it absolutely was a very large contributing factor to that, because it broadened perspectives, it opened up mindset, it brought in, that, diversity of thought that we need at the board level versus groupthink. So that's one example. The other is getting CEOs to really stand up when they have gone through that board transformation and encouraging them to speak up. And this is what we do at Him for Her. We host roundtables where we have different CEOs lead a discussion with potential board candidates and others. And I moderated one recently with Dara, the CEO of Uber. And when he took over Uber, it was not a diverse board. It was not a diverse company. We all heard a lot of the issues that, Maria, you mentioned this, it has to do with what practices show up in those companies. And now he has this diverse board, and he's saying, we're a better company because of it. And a lot of it is just blind spots. There's things, if you were raised one way or come from one set experience, you don't see and you're not thoughtful about.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I appreciate you giving the example of Uber, because we be, thoughtful to our companies, but that is an example we actually see in a lot of contexts where when you have a lack of diversity, that trickles into not just what the board operates, but the whole organization, right? This is the point of why the top matters. It trickles in not only in who you're drawing in, because you're like, hey, as a woman or as a person of color, I don't see somebody who looks like me, so I don't feel comfortable here, but it also impacts, we know, the culture and to recognize those outcomes. So these are great examples. So we have to have the leaders, we have to have these examples that are being shared, frankly, right, by the companies. And I know, if I can pull you in, Kaylee, you mentioned a company, I don't know how much you can share, maybe the name or anything, but there was an example, I think, in the grocery industry just around bringing in more diversity. Could you share kind of how maybe, or an example that you have seen where you see that change, that aha moment happen for the boards that bring in diversity?
Absolutely. I think that going to some of Joanna's and Maria's comments, I've fortunately seen a shift where 8 years ago I had boards asking me, and it was always, I will say always, white men asking me, show me how a woman is going to help improve our performance. Give me hard data. They wanted financial numbers. Now I can say there are plenty of studies that exist. Studies that show that risk oversight in boardrooms has been improved because of having women on the board. There are studies that show that companies by CEO have better talent retention statistics and better inclusive policies for their companies. That data is there. It's been done by universities and research institutions. So if somebody asks me that, I'm like, oh, how many reports would you like? Right. Unfortunately, that question is starting to subside. But I think, as in some of the more nuanced and human side of increasing diversity and making it an environment in the boardroom where it can really be impactful, I think your comment, Jessica, to changing the hearts is really where it comes in. And so with that, I've worked with a large number of boards around diversity, and it's been an ongoing and evolving topic. But I think the word intentionality really resonates with me from Maria's earlier comments, because that intentionality and succession planning for a board is necessary to be able to have a diverse and inclusive environment where cognitive diversity flourishes and boards are able to make better decisions, to have more robust discussions. And so I've seen a lot of work and have had the fortunate benefit of working with clients where we talk about, what do you need around the board table? What diversity is missing? And in some recent work with one of my clients who's moved to having almost 50% women, I think they're now 6. But they were looking recently to appoint a new person to the board. The CEO, he's a 68-year-old white man, but he is someone who, as he's cultivated his board through his chair role over the course of the past almost 8 years now, he's realized, he was like, with each person that we've brought on that doesn't look like me, just the quality of the boardroom has improved so much more. And I really enjoy working with the people around the table. And so the last person that he was looking for on the board, the company, we've been doing some work around board oversight of DE&I. And he was like, I really think we need to be able to understand our human capital better. They didn't have anyone in the boardroom who, they were all typically, I think the youngest person at that time was about 58. And so they were like, our workforce is significantly younger than that. Customer base currently and what we project we'll have in the next 10 years, they're going to all be significantly younger than we are. They'll be our grandchildren at that point.
Right.
As he was looking to bring on someone, he was like, I know I want another woman, so I want us to get to 50-50. There's no reason why we can't and shouldn't be. And then he started thinking about what other experiences are missing from the boardroom. So he started reaching out through his networks and through other board members' networks. And he was like, I really think having someone who comes from an HR background would really enhance the quality of cognitive diversity of our board. And so he recruited a woman who is the CHRO of a large nonprofit and brought her into the boardroom. And they have been able to make so much progress over the course of the past year in working with me to set what are going to be their DE&I statistics, not only for their workforce, but now they're looking to their customer base and into their communities doing philanthropy through the company's philanthropy efforts. And it's because they've thought about who is it and what is it that we need that can really help us understand all of our stakeholder perspectives.
That's so great. And it's such a great flag and something we are seeing trending again as we're coming out of the pandemic, but there is this expanded recognition of competencies that we need to have at this board level that we have been missing. And oftentimes the nice part when we talk about ESGs and also HR, we tend to have more women in those fields, right? And more experience. And so it's great to see that recognition that we have missed out on maybe just focusing on the investor or the finance, and we really needed this holistic way of looking at a more effective board coming together. Morgan, anything you want to add before I transition to my next question?
I would just add that I think more than just the messaging, it's important to recognize, and I think it's so clear now that the value that women bring to boards and positions is just it's clearly displayed across the board. It's proven across the board, and letting women be their own rock stars and their own advocates for that message, I think, has been incredibly important at the state level, at least. Is just kind of seeing how much women can really bring a department together or bring a board together and bring in different perspectives. So.
That's wonderful. Yeah, exactly. We got to show those stories and be willing to share them and not hold them just internally so people don't actually see them. Well, I kind of want to pivot our conversation because we're talking about sort of the skeptics and I think sort of the diversity side of this, and now maybe, if you will, more of the inclusion side of this. One thing I have run into, which has been really fascinating, and I interviewed a number of board directors for my last report with California Partners Project, and one of the women said, I have actively said no to opportunities because I didn't feel like I would really be valued in this position. And I think this is something we really need to pay attention to, right? Because if we know that women are self-selecting out of opportunities when they are very qualified to be there and companies want them to be there, but I think this was kind of mentioned by the Vice Chancellor in the last panel, but she's not going to thrive there. That's a problem. So in your interactions, many of you serving on boards, Morgan at that level, how do we then get to a place of really conversation within the board structure to say, how do we make sure we're actually listening? How do we actually make sure that she's bringing her different perspective there? How do we build that inclusion so that we don't have this situation where we actually have women self-selecting out and we don't we're not even getting into this conversation of the fact that almost 2.5 million women have permanently left the workforce because of the pandemic, because of the lack of support, right? That's I think a similar dynamic, frankly. But leave it, anyone jump in. How do we build that inclusion on the board?
I'm happy to start. Yeah. So one thing we do at Him for Her is in our onboarding of women, we really help them understand what are their unique skills and backgrounds and perspectives and how to best position themselves and have confidence in the role that they're going to play at the board and what expertise they're going to bring, where often they don't even recognize it. I mean, we'll be doing an onboarding dialogue and we'll feed back to them some things, and it's almost like a big aha. So I think, that's part of it. Unfortunately, as women, we all know this, we feel like we have to have everything, we have to cover everything 100% before we feel like we're ready to jump in. And I would just encourage any woman out there, really be self-reflective. Think about, what you really bring to the table, where you've, built your career and feel very confident. I mean, this might sound like a crazy thing, but sometimes I used to just go into the ladies' room and look myself in the mirror and say, I deserve to be here. Bring that in but also do your homework, because Jessica, I'm not sure if, some of the women who are opting out because in even the interview process of joining a board, they feel like there isn't respect and trust.
So that's where I'm going, is the structure.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they can, I feel like it's less about them. It's more about the situation they're stepping into. They're protecting themselves. And I wonder, how do we change that for their own confidence, but also that dynamic that's happening in the boardroom?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, when I've made mistakes on boards, I haven't met every board member. So, I think it's about having those one-on-one dialogues with each board member and building that relationship one by one. And if they're feeling like there isn't receptivity of, really having them join, or they feel like, maybe that interaction it's been dismissive or it hasn't been respectful, bring that information back to that feedback back to the CEO, because no CEO wants that. So that's just one way, but do your homework.
That's great. Those are great pieces of advice. Maria, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think we need to recognize that, just like every company has a culture, every boardroom has their own culture. Right. And if someone has been offered a board position, we should all recognize that means that it has gone through some pretty extreme vetting on the side of the company. So it's not to be taken lightly to turn it away. But just to, add to some of the comments that Joanna was making, I always tell women, own your power. You are very powerful, your credentials, you have all the experience. We need to step into those roles and just own it and demonstrate our influence and have the courage to speak up and to contribute to whatever culture is in place. I'll tell you, at the board that I sat on, the public company board, we went through a merger, and I joined the subsequent acquiring bank board. And I was very hesitant because I was going to be the only woman on that board. And it was an investor group. So the board was primarily made up of an investor group that had been together for many years. And I remember one time, maybe 9 months into my service, recognizing as we exited that the culture of, after a board meeting, all the men went to the club for a good cocktail. And I remember when I found that out, I was like, nobody told me, and they were all shocked. I quickly got an invitation that day, and every board meeting after that, it was like, hey, don't forget, Maria, we're all going to go have a cocktail. And, I joined that. And that's, it is a culture, and it's every board has, its own unique way of interacting. But as women, we need to, break through that and just own our space there.
Good. That's wonderful. Great advice. I love that story. Hey, I want to be invited. That sounds great. Kaylee Morgan, any thoughts there? How do we build more inclusion and kind of perspective, not just for the woman coming into it, but the people who are there? How do we educate them? And bring them in?
Maria and Joanna's comments, which I think are just absolutely spot on from my experience. But I think it's important also for women to think about, if you're interested in joining a board, know what you're walking into, to Maria's comment about board culture. Recently joined the board of Horizon Education, which is a California for-profit company. And whenever I was thinking about, the chair approached me, he was like, I want you to join this board. I think, your background as an attorney, your background leading M&A, both from business and legal perspectives, and just some other experience I've had. He was like, I think you will help our company grow tremendously and help us take it where we know this company can go in the next 5 years. I got excited about the company's purpose, but I was like, all right, now I need to get to know who am I going to be working with. So at least if I'm walking in, I'm not going to be blindsided. So I spent time with each board member one-on-one. Unfortunately, most of it was through Zoom. I spent time with the CEO and a couple of members of his team. And I wanted to know, if I'm going to take on this position, I want to know that my experience actually is going to allow me to be successful and positively impact the company's performance and board effectiveness. But then if I'm walking in, I can understand some of the nuances walking into the boardroom for the first time, which I think was incredibly helpful. And then, once I've moved into that role and then through my observations of other women's, I think it's important to not only be a fearless leader in the boardroom as a woman, but also be resilient. There are times where, through different boards that I've served on, or even in advisory roles with boards, where I'll make a comment and it's rejected. It may be something that has validity, but it's just not the solution that's being chosen for that particular matter. And it doesn't impact my perception of my intelligence or the value that I bring to the board or that particular situation. So I think that there's a bit of, being fearless, being reflective, and understanding that part of working in a board is you're working as part of a team. So you have to bring out perspectives of each person, and it's okay to have something where you're not going to be the sole decision maker. And I think that can be important, just to really instilling that resilient factor in your personality. And then the other thing I would really recommend, if you are fortunate enough to either be sitting in a board seat or sitting in a role where you're able to influence who's in the boardroom or in an executive role, put women in positions of leadership. Nominate women, or raise your hand to be the governance committee chair. Raise your hand to be the board chair, because once you have women in those roles, the diversity of boards increases tremendously. The environment of inclusion, the cohesion, and the health of dynamics in the boardroom really has a platform then to be able to be healthy and be able to allow others to have their voice and impact heard in a positive way.
That's great, Kaylee. Great advice. And we know that absolutely in these critical roles. And frankly, I just want to mention and connect the dots between private sector and nonprofit. That's something we're seeing as a tendency in both. And also I would suggest maybe in even commissions, but I haven't seen the stats as much, but the chair roles, right? The people who are chairing not only the committees or obviously a chairman of a company's board, they really have so much power in dictating sort of what's discussed and how things go. And so we definitely see that's like kind of the next 2.0 level. Let's get women on the boards, and then they're not in these key roles. We need to work on that. And I know we're working on that here in California, thanks to the legislation, getting more women on these boards. Yay, SB 826. That is really working, by the way. Great advice, Kaylee. Morgan, any other thoughts there on inclusion and what you're maybe seeing on these state commissions where you're seeing productivity really thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think everybody really kind of nailed this one on the head. I would only add that I think putting more women on the board so that women aren't the only voice on the one board, right? And I think we have the ability to do that at the state level, and maybe even a lot easier than other folks. But, we have the ability to kind of look at, as terms are expiring and as we're kind of transitioning boards, making sure that we're putting more than one woman on each board. So not, there are power in numbers. And I think that, women who are hesitant, and we do hear it all the time in our recruitment, hesitant to go onto a board that they may think they're not the expert in that issue area or whatever it is. We're very clear about the voice that we need, right? The voice that we need on this board is the perspective of a woman. It is the perspective of someone who's going to represent the public representation, or someone who's going to represent whatever specific voice we're kind of missing, to make sure that women have that confidence going in and be persistent, really. I mean, it's not, as Keely said, it's not, you may not always get your way, but be persistent about speaking up and about expressing your opinion on certain things on the commission and on board. So
that's great.
Two quick things.
Yes.
If anyone can remember, it's 3. When you get 3 women on a board or 3 diverse candidates, it does change the dynamic. So if anyone can remember 333, and I wouldn't be doing my job at Him for Her if I didn't mention we're launching a public benefit corp, because it's one thing to put diverse candidates on boards. It's another to how do we make boards more effective? And most of the programs out there on board effectiveness are IQ. It's how to do a comp committee or audit. And this is about the EQ. How do we, it's all of those, soft skills and interpersonal that are absolutely needed. So more to come on that.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. And it's so great. And actually, a couple of really important pieces. We didn't even get into this as dynamically, but we know this again from research and practice. We do tend to see women lead differently. It's not that we don't use many of the same successful skills to achieve, but we bring in these not only different perspectives, but kind of a different way of leading. And what we know is we bring those together. Maybe the EQ and IQ is a good example of that. We have these better outcomes. So thinking that way, how is that different? I do want to also mention one thing in the last couple of minutes we have before we wrap up. Hey, the men matter, right? So I want to give a shout out to Jerry Sanders, the CEO of the chamber here in San Diego, because he was like, yeah, let's do an initiative on that, right? We need men at the top who also have that power, as we know well, or Governor Newsom or others. Anyone want to share maybe a person, but also how do we get more men to be these allies that we need so much? Because they do have still the power in many cases to say that this is something that we should focus on.
I'll tell you, I always focus on men with daughters to say, what kind of world do you want your daughters to be in? Because you want to find points of leverage. And as I told you in our model, we embrace the venture capital community to be advocates and champions for putting more women on boards. But we started with men with daughters. It has a big impact.
There you go. Right. Speak right to the heart of, there you go, of the family. I mean, anybody else? I know Byron Laughlin, right? With Kaylee's team, who had started a lot of this board governance as a champion. Maria and
you know what? When I became chairwoman of the community bank that I served on the board, I mean, I really took it upon myself to go meet with several colleagues, male colleagues, not only at our board, but across the industry, and really because I felt that I was a bit of a unicorn in that the fact of being the chairwoman of a bank that ultimately I ended up leading its sale, and that was unusual. But to be able to change those hearts and minds by maybe sharing my own personal journey, and to saying that it's possible to have a person of color like myself lead in this particular manner, I wanted to be able to use that example, not only to share it with other peers and colleagues, but also to use it as an example for other women that were coming up through the ranks, that through their, someone said it earlier, if you can see it, you can be it. I think that's a very important part of making sure that other organizations have individuals that they can point to say, you could be like them.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, it takes a village, as we've already said. It takes a lot. It takes everyone to actually hear about this. Morgan, anything else you want to share about getting our male colleagues in on this important topic as well?
Well, I think I have probably one of the best mentors and leaders on this issue, with Governor Newsom being such a strong advocate for getting women on more boards and commissions and in powerful positions. And as you've seen, he's appointed in all of these decisions. We might bring the recommendations to him, but he really he's the one putting folks in these places. And so, he's put, Secretary Lourdes Ramirez, Secretary Yolanda Richardson, he's definitely shown that diversity and bringing diverse women into these leading roles in the state is important to him and his administration. I think he's been really a leading advocate on that. And because of that, we've really made some huge strides in our positions and our boards and commissions. So
absolutely, we can see that measured impact. And we had Mayor Todd Gloria, who spent, our mayor down here, say, hey, this is an important conversation. I need to be there. And I appreciate his leadership so much on this space as well. So thank you to everyone. This was a great conversation. I had so much fun, like the time went, and here we are. So thanks to each of you. I I value it so much. And I want to just mention to everyone watching, don't leave us, because we decided we're so zoomed out. I know we're zoomed out and I know it's Friday. However, we want to talk about this because what we're hoping to do at the Chamber is actually produce some best practices based on these amazing expert insights. What can the business community, what can cities do better to lead? We're not just talking about why this matters. We care about why it matters, but we need tactical solutions because the business community needs it. They need this tangible ideas. What can I do next? Our breakouts are facilitated by some amazing discussion leaders who are CEOs and heads of their organizations, as I mentioned. So don't leave us. We're going to transition and start the Zoom breakouts in about 3 minutes. But again, thank you to these amazing panelists. I appreciate it. Morgan, Joanna, Kaylee, and Maria. Thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks. It was awesome. All right. So hang tight, everyone. Don't leave us. Welcome back. Oh, I see our group, a couple of the groups I was with. Yay.
Yeah.
Will you just give me a thumbs up, Catherine, when everyone's back?
Yeah, they're still closing out their conversation. So
cool. Well, I popped into a couple of rooms. I can see there are people here, and that was really cool to hear your conversations.
Yes, some great conversation.
Awesome. Well, I am going to ask once we have everyone back. Catherine, are we ready?
Yep, I need to.
So what we're going to do, Lisa, I have you on. Can I have Lisa and also Julie, because we have both of them together leading on. So Lisa and Julie were leading a group together. We had 2 discussion leaders. So we had the powerhouse. Click out. Do we see Julie back, or is she there?
There we go.
Oh, awesome. There's Julie. Awesome. So I'd love to hear from Lisa and Julie, who moderated and led the first discussion room. What did you talk about? What kind of resonated in your conversation? We'd love to hear, and we're taking copious notes because we are going to produce some stuff. I hope you both did too, because I need you. But Julie, I'll start with you, and then Lisa.
Actually, we're going to reverse it. We're going to start with Lisa.
And then Julie, yay.
So, we started out talking about training and mentorship. I think we were pretty inspired to hear about B of A's training program and hear about the mentorship, that formal mentorship program just around leadership even that exists at SDG&E. And so we started out talking about those 2 things, and some of the ideas that we came up with around mentorship and training were, if we could get best practices around a toolkit or something for chamber members, where we bring those chamber members who are, doing a really great job at advancing women leadership within their organizations, because part of the thing is not just getting women on boards and commissions, but getting women from the mid-level in their career positions to the C-suite. And so if we can get some really best practices from those organizations, maybe get them together and have a toolkit that can be shared with other chamber members, that would be something that we thought would be really powerful. Julie, you want to take, I know you probably remember other things too. You want to take the next one?
Sure. I think it was a really good discussion, and Carol with the Girl Scouts brought it up, and I think we certainly all agreed, is sometimes for-profit boards, when they are looking at women candidates or candidates in general, and they see the nonprofit experience, depending on how the nonprofit structured, whether it was more governance as opposed to operations, they may not think that they have the skill set or the experience or the board experience from some of the nonprofit boards that they sat on. So Carol came from the angle of, if we can, one, structure and or redefine or lean in a little bit more to helping nonprofit boards and shifting their focus, or equally balancing their focus of more on governance as opposed to just operations, then those women, and since we're talking about women in particular, that are sitting on their boards, that will elevate their experience. So as they go after for-profit boards, the experience that they have from nonprofit will help make them a little bit better prepared. But then also, too, what it can do for nonprofit boards is elevate the board members that we're going after. And I say we because we're a 501c6. So same thing. It's going to elevate the women leaders that we have on our boards, but then also, too, as we're attracting board members, we've got a higher expectation. And then, two, those on the outside looking to apply to our boards have a better understanding and or perception of nonprofit boards. So, Lisa, I think I covered it, and I know Carol's still on here. So certainly, Carol, if there's something else that you wanted to add, you can either put it in the chat or certainly feel free to chime in. But I think it was something that most of us had not seen happening in other destinations.
Right.
And so, you know, I say destinations given my line of work, but other cities. And so I think this could be really something that San Diego could embrace.
Yeah, I really love that idea. And actually, I popped into another room and they're going to share. It was interesting because it was similar to what you all said, but in a different context in terms of the talent than nonprofit boards. But I keep wanting to push us also to thinking about, okay, then how do we also, and the best practices is going to be helpful in this, but how do we get the boards, right, of these companies to value nonprofit experience in a way that's going to enhance their corporation's decision making? And so that's another thing I want us, you know, to think about where could we lean in on that piece, because that's something I think I haven't seen that, and I think it's a really powerful complement to what's already being done. So that's really good. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that rich discussion. And Lisa, and again, for everyone to hear, we're going to be compiling these ideas and having this at all our talent. You can see our fabulous Allison Phillips, our comms director, and our strategist also over there, we're going to make sure to pull these together and release them to everyone, because I think it's going to help, and also maybe push some new ideas, right? That's what we're here for.
It was great fun. And I apologize for looking so orange. I look like I took a weird vacation.
No, you look great.
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, great job, Julie and Lisa. Great. And I know your colleagues were wonderful. Okay, we're going to move to the second one. We have Idara.
Oops.
I would love to have Idara on, and these are, by the way, fabulous board members of the San Diego Chamber, and also active business women in our wonderful region. All right, Idara, where are you, my dear? Oh, there's Idara. Perfect. Hey, so we'd love to hear what your group talked about. And Idara is also the board chair for Lead San Diego, doing wonderful leadership training at the Chamber. And so thank you, Idara, for your leadership.
Thank you,
Anna
Jessica.
Kaiser.
Yes. Thank you. Great discussion in the group in terms of what stood out, as well as actions that can be taken. And so some of the things that I'll highlight is where this part of the conversation was just intersectionality, you know, and with numbers, but also the power of leaders who look like our communities, just the power of representation and seeing what you can be. The other was that the diversity of viewpoints and what that brings, because it's so easy to have blind spots despite best intentions. The power of also stakeholder governance, it's really important. And this rule of three, and it's actually palpable once you have those three, you really do start to see.
How are you?
And it also increases the power of representation on different committees. The power of your role in the role of
yes, I'm the one that
opportunity.
Oh, sorry.
I know.
Everyone else can be muted except for Idara. That's great. Thank you. Go ahead.
And truly stepping into the power of your role, that when you are the chair, you have the opportunity to ask the questions, which can also be very powerful. Ask about the research and to bring in the necessary committees, term limits, whatever it is that will make the board as well as the organization more effective and create more opportunities to increase diversity. And the other thing is also the power of finding mentors and women leading and supporting other women. Then as far as practical strategies, I'm bringing in experts, bringing in training, because sometimes that third party perspective is not only the expertise, but also allows for a smoother transition to the actions because it's seen and received objectively. Setting goals and quotas back to metrics, making it measurable, study, measure, and then track. as well as getting a strategic partner, especially when you are the first voice in the space, that it can be draining to be the one that's asking the question for the first time, because some of these challenges are not only ongoing, they're actually fairly recent. So much has changed in the last 18 months. It can be exhausting, and to recognize that it can be very draining, having a strategic partner who will not only serve as somewhere where you can vent and get validated, but also help with brainstorming and thinking about those strategic moves and partnerships that you can make to affect the change in your role and in the organization. And again, measuring, baking into strategy. And the other thing that's powerful is pushing for transparency and accountability every opportunity that you get. One thing that came up as a question was whether there's also an opportunity to highlight and identify boards that actually do have best practices and are model boards. A great discussion. Those are just the highlights of a lot of robust discussion around various topics.
I love it. And there's a commonality there, obviously, between first and second in terms of the best practices being shared, what's working, but really good stuff. You know, what I'm hearing from you, Adara, in your conversation with your team is a little bit of something that my business partner, Kristen Haffert's on, and she led one of the groups we've been working on at Mind the Gap, which is who we end up getting hired by, frankly, when we're talking about elevating diversity as a strategic imperative for our organization, is the people who are the change agents inside of these companies and organizations. I know, Kaiser, you have a lot of them because you've clearly done it up to the leadership level, because we needed to get to the leadership level, but we need those people to be supported. And I mean, the point about being draining, this work is draining because it's hard, because you're fighting against what has been the status quo. And it's easier to fall into the status quo, right, than to change. So I really like this piece. And as much as you can kind of see in your work, again, as I've said this a million times, we're going to be publishing this. So with all of what you talked about in mind, you know, what can business leaders see and read that will really help them think practically, you know, as much as we can capture that would be really wonderful. Thank you for your great ideas. And the critical mass, I want to mention a stat, this was in my report in June for San Diego. Only 18% of public companies, and again, we know more about public companies because we can look at their filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission compared to other groups who don't have to file anything. But what we know is only 18% of San Diego companies had critical mass on their boards. What I mean by that is basically half of the public companies in San Diego have one woman on their board, right? Like, so that's not really that diverse, you know, like, so we need to get to a place where and that's a benchmark we can maybe strive for. Great point. Adara, awesome job. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to bring on Betsy Brennan, who is our fabulous CEO of the Downtown Partnership and one of our partners on this effort. Hi, Betsy.
Hi, how are you?
Great to see you. Thank you.
Nice to see everybody. Thanks for putting this on.
Absolutely. Thank you for being a part of it and supporting us. And I'd love to have you share what your group talked about today.
Sure. We had a really dynamic group with Alessandra, Teresa, Valeria, and Barbara. And we could have talked for another hour. I mean, we were really doing constructive work.
Love it.
But some of the big takeaways, and I hope I do our group justice, but is that really importance of the diversity of thought, and the concept of PIE really resonated with people, with performance, image, and exposure, and exposure. And some of the sort of takeaways were, it kind of does echo some of the other groups, but an investment in youth. So an investment in girls and developing self-confidence from early ages and keeping that going. So that was really important to our group. And to be resilient and to teach those sort of soft skills around all of these things that you have to do to really get up into the leadership roles. We also had so that was an emphasis on the next generation. We also talked about creating an environment in the workplace that really nurtures advancement of your career. So women supporting women and not breaking them down, really important concept, and you know, not always relevant, and not always you don't always have that in a business. And also we talked a little bit about some other actionable steps around outreach. So for this initiative to really start outreaching to other groups that might not be as engaged with the chamber right now, and tell them about this initiative and how they can be involved and really get out there around the county and around the state. And also maybe creative ways for people to be involved in nonprofits that then can lead to boards. So whether that's membership for mid-level executives that they can then meet people that serve on other boards and commissions that are for-profit companies would be really interesting, or public companies, publicly traded companies. And then also they had ideas around outreaching to small business administration, small business groups, because there are a lot of very qualified, competent women in those businesses that might have their head down because they're trying to create their small business, but have all of these skills and competencies and would be wonderful board members somewhere. And and just having a bigger pool of women. So all of these ways we talked about are actionable steps to have a bigger pool of women to even draw from. So I think those were our highlights.
Fantastic, Betsy. And I think another group reinforces that last piece around the small business talent. And these are all wonderful pieces for us. Again, I mentioned this in one of the breakouts that also came into the report that I did, which is there's a lot of great little things. And I'm speaking to San Diego specifically. I think most of us are San Diegans on the phone, although if there's Californians broadly, this I think is relevant everywhere. But how do you bring the siloed groups doing this stuff together to build scale, right? Just like you would in a regular company. So you're not just not being duplicative, but you're also enhancing what already exists and you're learning from each other. And it takes these two sides, because you mentioned the inspiring women to lead, and we love that. And I think we're doing that better in San Diego, but we're not pushing the structures to change as quickly, and incentivizing them and helping them see all of the better outcomes they're going to see, especially as we come out of COVID, when we have the diverse talent we need, is what we need to really channel. So these are great, Betsy. Awesome. Very wonderful. And I hope I can steal your notes. All of your discussion leaders, I hope you will ping me, because this is what we're going to pull together. Awesome. And we have a couple more folks. I am really excited to be joined by Carmen. And is it Noir? I want to make sure I say your last name. Noir. Is the executive director of Biocom, and it's really exciting for us in San Diego to have your leadership here. Obviously, the life science sector is a huge part of our economy, and we need to see more women in it. And I get to do work in biotech myself, so I love it. Love to hear what your group discussed, Carmen.
Absolutely. And I'm actually with the Institute. We're the 501c3 and affiliated with Biocom California, the trade association. And thank you to Crystal, Lauren, and Kelly that were part of our group. We had a lot of discussion around small businesses as an untapped talent pool, and whether that's small business owners, entrepreneurs, employees, minority-owned business owners. And we talked about how might we increase opportunities and resources, whether that's board training events, such as the events that are happening today, leadership development, and other resources. How might the chambers, cities, trade associations, organizations help build capacity for small businesses through events, or through even simply increasing opportunities to sit on committees within the chamber or trade associations or organizations? That could go a long way. But we also had a conversation about how might we support boards or encourage more boards collectively to redefine the role requirements and the nomination practices. Traditionally, these are opportunities that are going to people with a C-suite title or a lead VP or a leadership title. So even reimagining, again, the requirement and looking beyond the C-suite increases the access and the opportunity and allows for more people to see themselves in those positions. It's not so much about training more women, but rather how do we prioritize competencies versus experience? And we had a lot of discussion around the flexibility and around childcare. And so again, just making it more tangible for companies to see through practical solutions and case studies or webinars to allow them to see, just like through COVID, many companies were forced into this remote work environment, and many saw that it's in fact possible, showing them that it's possible to support and invest in their employees and their well-being in childcare or in providing more flexible options. So just allowing them to see how that looks like through companies of all sizes, not just more mature, but also how is this possible for the smaller companies.
Thank you so much, Carmen. This is wonderful, great advice. And I really love your first one. It's kind of where my head is a lot, because I think that is one of the biggest challenges. We're not redefining, or we need to redefine who we need and what we will benefit from. And that is a great tangible example of what you can frankly share with a best practice manual that we share out is, hey, think more robustly about the talent in the background and the experience, and not just the experience, but the competencies that have been missed. And we're seeing that with COVID. I think the other thing that's related to, as we've mentioned, 2.5 million plus, I mean, net, it's been 5.5 million women have left the workforce on whole. We're thinking permanently over 2 million in the US. It's a significant number. So we're losing talent, and we're not, and how do we retain that better? And that's where it's a great segue. I'm glad I joined your group to hear the flexibility piece. That is why the board, that leadership level, you have to be talking about those things and how they're related to retaining the best talent and having more flexibility and not needing to be in the office every day, which we're all discussing right now as we come into this new sort of world. Carmen, thank you so much for being here with the Institute and Viacom Institute and all your leadership. It's really wonderful. And okay, great. And then I think we just have one more. Kristen, I think we're left with my business partner. Kristen, you get to meet Kristen Haffert. She's actually on the East Coast. Kristen, I'd love to hear, hear how your group went, and we're gonna wrap up after this. This is exciting. Hear your ideas.
Great. Yeah. Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for participating today. We had a great discussion, and it was super interesting because we had Brenda, Martha, and Patricia, and who are all very senior and have long, amazing careers. And two of the women in our group came from STEM, and so, we had, a really big discussion around still the importance of networking and initiatives like this. So, it was heartwarming to be validated in terms of sort of being able to connect with other women, and particularly some women from STEM. And so so one of the first things we talked about was that value proposition and sort of the more human element that women bring to work environments. And so, talking about how do we actually educate people about that difference. So that's a nice follow on from what we were just talking about, Jess, in terms of partially in terms of different competencies, but also thinking about, how do we express and educate people about the life experience that women bring to the table and how that shapes business and shapes the work that we do in different sectors. And then very practically, and I'll echo, this came before, but just really actually having the chamber help sort of facilitate more information about the groups that are out there. We had a request, earlier during the panels for some of the names of the groups that were discussed, but also letting people know about, who are the connecting groups like Him for Her, who are the groups that are, specifically focused on the training. And I mentioned that, the California Partners Project that we've had experience working with, they have a whole website that has a lot of this information. But the chamber, we can certainly for this region look at, how do we connect you with some of those opportunities, and that sort of connects a bit up with the toolkit idea, because we talked about sort of some of those technical leadership concepts like the PIE that help get women from help women sort of harness their power as women, sort of as they're looking at board service. So what are those kind of tangible, concrete leadership skills that they can harness and be more aware of, and what tools can we be giving as the chamber? And then we also talked about, again, to echo what's been said briefly, making sure that boards do have the culture of wanting to listen to, the diversity that they bring on. And as you know, Jess, this is what we deal with. People get very excited about the recruitment piece, and then they're like, oh, wait a second, she left. Why? because she doesn't fit in and no one listens to her and she doesn't see anyone who looks like her. And so that certainly was a piece of our conversation. And also just the fact that, you know, there's the reality of the family care and the commitments that we have and want to have, you know, in many cases, and the, you know, how do companies like the work that SDG&E is doing and others to think through, you know, how do we think about people as human beings, and how, whether it's meeting times or some of the examples that we heard today, you know, how can we be creative about some more of those ideas that really think about what people's lives are like, so that we're thinking of them as humans and connecting the dots and making, you know, our organizations places where women, you know, can show up because the rest of their life is kind of considered in the mix. And then, yeah, I think, oh, and finally, we talked about a number of things, but, you know, certainly intersectionality and women of color is a part of that discussion of, you know, making sure women feel like they see themselves and are supported by people that look like them, but also making sure we connect with, bringing men into these initiatives, you know, as we all know, you know, there's still, that's where the power lies, and in many cases. And so, you know, people like Jerry Sanders and the mayor, you know, how can we use male allies to know that this is, you know, this isn't just like a women's networking thing that's soft. This is a very powerful, you know, very directed, targeted thing that we're doing here. And that's why we're all on this call making this time, is because, you know, it's about, you know, channeling ourselves and our power to board service and to leadership roles where we can really have an impact. So I hope that I also did our team justice.
That was amazing. You had a lot of conversation and well done. Well, I love it. And actually your last point's important, because I heard from the chamber team, I think we only had a couple men on this whole thing. And I'm always like, this isn't just about men, right? This is about everyone having a better workplace. And so we need to work on that, right? We need to work on it in San Diego. We need to work on it nationally. How do we talk about this more effectively? Just as the women's movement needs to be inclusive of women of color and women different backgrounds, we have to also, when I say women's movement, I mean efforts to try to elevate women into leadership broadly. We also need to also get men to be a part of these conversations. So that's obviously a place we need to work on. We need to work on that. That's something we're very passionate about. But this is amazing. I'm so glad this worked. I didn't know it would, but I knew I had great people who got it and were with us. The chamber being first and foremost, my business partner who's always thinking creatively, who, by the way, I give a shout out. Kristen has worked in 120 countries on women's leadership in all over Africa, all over Europe, all over Asia, and brings amazing insight. And one thing we have seen is the same problems all over the world. This is not unique to the United States. This is the world's challenge to elevate women and be seen as valued. And so thank you for being a part of this. Allison, Catherine, I want to give you both a shout out at the chamber. Jerry, Neil Morzon, we do have a man. Thank you, Neil. Neil is the chair of the San Diego Chamber and has been a great ally and advocate for this work. And thank you for chiming in. I heard you were very active, Neil, in the chat. So thank you. We are going to compile these great ideas. We're going to share it with the Chamber's board of directors. We're going to share it with the wider community for all our talent. And we are really excited about where we'll go with this. It takes everyone to have input and creative ideas as we evolve and grow as better companies and better organizations. And so thank you all for being here. Allison, what did I miss? Oh, one more thing. We want everyone to sign up if you're interested in serving on a board or commission. We have launched, as part of this effort, the board list. We're building the talent database of San Diego women who want to serve on the boards, the board level at public companies, private companies, nonprofits. So we have some great information. Allison has sent you a link where you actually can sign up and create a profile to be seen by companies, which is really cool because it's, again, matching the supply and the demand. And I just thank you, everyone. What did I miss? Thank you to my amazing facilitators today, Julie Coker, Lisa K, Idara Ungazaiju. I have to work on pronouncing your name. I love it. It's wonderful. Betsy Brennan, Carmen Noir, and my business partner, Kristen. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Allison, did I miss anything?
I think you nailed it. Thank you.
Okay,
everyone.
awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.